Good morning and welcome to First Parish in Needham, our virtual worship service this morning. I'm Rebecca Keller-Scholl and I am your worship associate. I'm looking forward to welcoming everyone back to our church at some point, but we're not there yet. So in the meantime, it's wonderful to gather with you on this Zoom platform. Our congregation was founded in 1711 along with the town of Needham, and we want to keep both the congregation and our church safe for everyone. During COVID, this coronavirus pandemic, our building is closed. We will be gathering online at least through the end of September, probably longer. We encourage you to receive our newsletter. Send your request by email to office@uuneedham.org or by going to our website, uuneedham.org, and click on Get Involved and then Newsletter. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So many ways to stay in touch. Our sincere hope and prayer is that these online services and connection opportunities will provide some emotional and social closeness that we treasure in our faith community. You're invited to join in the readings and the hymns. We just ask that you stay muted during that time and actually stay muted for the entire service, but sing at home as loudly as you would like with great joy and glee. We will invite everyone to unmute for fellowship and conversation during our social hour directly after the worship service. This morning's worship is offered by Dr. Kathy Livingston. Dr. Livingston holds a doctorate in education from the University of Illinois, and her career includes teaching and leadership positions in kindergarten through 12th grade and higher education settings. She served as CEO of a nonprofit working with Boston Public Schools to help students strengthen their math skills and their resilience. So please go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. Breathe deeply as we settle into worship. We are so very glad that you're here this morning.
Good morning. We light our chalice this morning as a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith with the following words, beginning with words from Paul Robeson. I shall take my voice wherever there are those who want to hear the melody of freedom or the words that might inspire hope and courage in the face of despair and fear. Using the words of David White, to be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as gifts to others.
In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the covenant is a set of promises the membership of the Church strives to honor with one another and out in the world. Please say along with me from home the words of our parish covenant as shown on your screen. We gather as a loving community to encourage and comfort one another. We gather as a diverse community to support each other in our search for spiritual truth. We gather as a service community to live our beliefs through action and care for our world. Though we cannot gather in person during this time, we are living these promises every day.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
So our first reading today is from David White. But no matter the medicinal virtues of being a true friend or sustaining a long, close relationship with another, the ultimate touchstone of friendship is not improvement, either of the other nor of the self. The ultimate touchstone is witness, the privilege of having been seen by someone, and the equal privilege of being granted the sight of the essence of another, to have walked with them and to have believed in them, and sometimes just to have accompanied them for however brief a span on a journey impossible to accomplish alone. Our second reading today is from John O'Donohue. One of the most beautiful gifts in the world that you can give to another is the gift of encouragement. When someone encourages you, that person helps you over a threshold you might otherwise never have crossed on your own.
This congregation has been supported by the volunteered time and treasure of its members and friends since its founding in 1711. This is the time in our service when we, the modern stewards of this church, offer to give what we can to build and sustain the world we envision. For the entire summer, our plate collection will be divided equally between First Parish in Needham and the Needham Community Council, which is a local nonprofit which runs, among other things, our local food pantry. Our neighbors are depending on this service now more than ever. To donate to today's offering, you can use one of three different methods. For those of you with a smartphone, you can use our new Text to Give program. Just put the phone number 73256 and text to that number UU Needham space plate space then the $sign with the amount you'd like to give, all in one message. If you want your money applied to your pledge, please text instead that same phone number with UU Needham Pledge 21 or Pledge 22, depending on whether you want it applied to the fiscal year just completed or the new fiscal year. Follow that with a $sign and the amount you'd like to give. If you'd prefer to mail First Parish a check, please make it out to First Parish in Needham, put the date of this service and the word collection in the memo line, and then mail your check to 23 Dedham Avenue, Needham, Massachusetts, 02492. Alternatively, if you want the money applied to your pledge for either the fiscal year just finished or the upcoming year, put FY21 or FY22 in that memo line instead. The last and perhaps easiest method to use is our website, uuneedham.org, for making your donation. There is a giving button in the upper right corner with a drop-down menu where you'll find an entry labeled Donate Now. Following that link and signing into your Realm account, you'll be able to fill in your donation information and choose a recipient fund for its destination, such as plate collection. Thank you for everything you're able to give to help support and sustain this congregation and the vital work of our community partners. Please take these next few moments to give what you can and know it will be gratefully received.
Is your favorite color blue? Do you always tell the truth? Do you believe in outer space? And now I'm learning you. Is your skin as tanned as mine? Does your hair flow sideways? Did someone take a portion of your heart? And now I'm learning you. And if you don't mind, can you tell me all your hopes and fears and everything that you believe in? Would you make a difference in the world? I'd love for you to take me to a deeper conversation. Only you can make me. I've let my guard down for you, and in time you will too. And if you don't mind, can you tell me all your hopes and fears and everything that you believe in? Would you make a difference in the world? I'd love for you to take me to a deeper conversation. Only you can make me. And if you don't mind, can you tell me all your hopes and fears and everything that you believe in? Would you make a difference in the world? I'd love for you to take me to a deeper conversation. Only you can make me. Deeper conversation with me. Deeper conversation with me. Deeper conversation with me. Deeper conversation. Oh, 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 Does your name rhyme with mine?
So the Ministry of Deep Conversations. Good morning and welcome, everyone. As we seem to be making progress this past spring in containing the virus, I started becoming more optimistic that we might be able to return to some of our favorite places in person, like First Parish, by September. But for now, it appears that we are safest in continuing to follow all the safe precautions recommended by the CDC. Personally, I've adjusted in mostly positive ways to living a more reclusive lifestyle. I'm spending more time at home, an environment that brings me many pleasures, including enjoying the company of my two adorable cats. Having fewer distractions has opened up more time for me to read, reflect, research, write, and share what I'm learning. No doubt, we are all finding that we are spending more time alone. I think it's how we experience that time alone differentiates how we're doing during this period. Those of us who identify with a more introverted nature, like myself, may be finding it easier to acclimate to less noise and more time for reflection and quiet endeavors. I have had the great fortune during the last 2 years to be part of several groups made up of First Parish members. Connecting via Zoom has worked well for us, as our conversations continue to be rich, insightful, stimulating, and even fun. My growing awareness of how we at First Parish have created relationships that invite us into deeper conversations sparked me to reflect on the quality of conversations I have with others in my life. I was curious to learn if there are steps that any of us can take to invite others in our lives to share the benefits that stem from deeper connections. Some recent psychological studies are demonstrating that happy people actually have more meaningful conversations. What's unclear at this stage of the research is whether people make themselves happier by having deeper conversations, or whether people who are already happy just choose to engage in more meaningful talk. I think one benefit of meaningful conversations that I can attest to based on my own experience is that they create pathways for feeling connected to others in more meaningful ways. I really love the portion of the first reading by David Whyte, that whole section where he talks about the ultimate touchstone of friendship or close relationships is not improvement. Instead, it's bearing witness to another's life, and the privilege of having been seen by someone, and the equal privilege of being granted the sight of the essence of another. Wow. Poets really amaze me with their ability to put words together. Here's how I translate Whyte's words into something that we might understand more clearly. I think deeper conversations lead to connections that are a perfect antidote to loneliness. I leave the Zoom gatherings with members of First Parish feeling very connected. Though these occur in a remote environment, we're connecting in a way that allows us to be seen and to witness the essence of each other. I want to digress for a moment and just do a shout out and take a moment to recognize the work and community we have built at First Parish. When I first became involved with the parish over 20 years ago, I was introduced for the first time to the concept of a covenant. As I learned what a covenant was, it seemed to make sense for me for the parish to have one given its principles. But what has taken me some time to appreciate is that every group that I interacted with at the parish initially all referred to a covenant and often started our meetings by reading it. In many instances, like small group ministries, we actually write our own covenant. So the frequent references to a covenant initially felt a little artificial to me. But as I gradually watched how members of our parish, as well as our staff, conducted themselves, I began to see the value. By spending time identifying how we wanted to be together, the process of putting words to paper serves to bring us into the present moment, to remind ourselves how we want to occupy the space we share together. When I agreed to serve as president of the parish, I wasn't so much worried about the work and time demands that would be placed on me. I was, however, wondering what kind of grief might come my way based on decisions that I might be involved in. But here's the good news. By and large, members of our parish are quite supportive and appropriate in expressing their views. Our covenants and our principles help reinforce our ability and commitment to creating healthy, supportive environments. So you've made a believer out of me. Actually, First Parish has spoiled me in some ways, because after experiencing this kind of group respect for one another has made it more difficult for me to go into some of the other environments I spend time in, like a work environment, to see how people behave. So just to be clear, I want to reassure all of you that I didn't select this topic for my remarks today because I felt like we at First Parish needed to work on our conversations. Instead, I chose it because of my own interest in learning what I might do to expand my opportunities for deeper conversations with others in my life that are not part of First Parish. So my remarks today that elaborate on the ministry of deep conversations are translated from the work of David Whyte, a well-known author and Irish poet. I offer them as a way for us to expand and appreciate what I think of as another one of our ministries. Broadly defined, a ministry focuses on caring for others as well as for oneself. Our deeper conversations are a way of extending ourselves to connect with, support, and celebrate our relationships with others. White offers us 7 steps to deepen our conversation. The first step is stopping the conversation, which seems a little odd as a way of having deep conversations. But think about people in your life that you never seem to get beyond the surface level conversation with, even though you have an inkling that it would be possible to do so if you could figure out how to do it. I experience examples of this kind of conversation in my life. So if someone you speak with regularly always begins the conversation with an opening like, "What's new?" Good luck trying to answer that. If you haven't spoken to one another for a week or 2 or even a month, I never know how to pull out of all the experiences I've had something that would qualify as new. So I translate White's first step as an invitation to look at how I start a conversation with someone. Granted, most of us don't dive directly into deeper conversations unless we're in the midst of some crisis. So finding a way to open a conversation in such a way that it doesn't limit where we might go requires thought and perhaps a bit of luck and some intuition. So in the environment we're in currently, maybe questions like, how are you and your family coping with what appears to be an extended period of mask wearing, limited social contact, etc.? Another question, what are you personally finding most challenging about where we find ourselves? What resources are you drawing on to support yourself through these times? So stopping the conversation is an invitation to give thought to whether or not the way we set up some of our current conversations signals if we want to keep them on the surface level. So step 2, White phrases as asking the beautiful question, cultivating a friendship with the unknown. So White claims, and I agree with him, that we spend far too much time on mundane matters in our conversations. He suggests that we take more time in our life to experience beauty and that we share some of those experiences in our conversation. So in my classes of the last couple of weeks, we've actually gone on artist dates individually, where we each found out and sought out something that we would experience as beauty, spent 15 or 20 minutes experiencing it, and then we shared in the group what it made us feel like. We all agreed that at the end of that conversation, we felt so much more uplifted when the topic of beauty was part of our conversation. I link White's phrase of beautiful question with Parker Palmer's work on asking clarifying questions. If you want to learn more about Parker Palmer's work, specifically as circles of trust and asking clarifying questions, just Google Parker Palmer and that all will kind of bubble up. But here are some of his principles that guide us to know what it means to ask a clarifying questions. These kind of questions are open-ended, and they're worded in such a way that you can't anticipate what the answer is, which means getting used to cultivating a relationship with the unknown, that you don't want to necessarily know the answer to a question when you ask it, nor do you have an expectation what the answer should be. It's helpful to stay with the language that the person used. So if I shared in a conversation something like, I fear I'm facing an impossible situation in this circumstance, you might want to use my same language when asking a clarifying question, like, what about the situation makes you feel like it's impossible? This is a process to learn to trust your own intuition. You want to listen deeply and be in touch to see if questions are coming from your heart and not just your head. Remember, we're not trying to give advice, express judgment, or fix someone with these questions. So this would be an example that's not a clarifying question. If I was in conversation with you and I said, well, don't you think this would work better if you just did X, Y, and Z? So that's giving advice and judging. So the principle that informs what we mean by clarifying questions is based on a belief that we all have our own inner teacher who's able to access his or her own inner wisdom and resourcefulness in finding our way through passages of our lives that are challenging, confusing, or even painful. This summer, I was lucky enough to participate in 2 separate 3-day retreats based on the work of Parker Palmer. The retreats involved part of the time working in circles of trust and asking clarifying questions. Each retreat was limited to 25 people, and we spent part of our time working in circles of trust. This just means working in groups of 3 people. In that period, it's about an hour together, and each of us are given 20 minutes to present an issue, and then the next 20 minutes, the other 2 people in the group ask clarifying questions, and then we kind of do a wrap up at the end. So actually, it probably takes about 3 hours with 3 of us in the group. So for my turn as a focus person, I chose to share what I was thinking of as my priorities for the fall. So I had set some goals by the end of August. I made some of them are still in progress. And so at the end of presenting what I was thinking about doing, I shared that I was worried that I wasn't doing enough to respond to all of the chaos that we are witnessing in our world. So one of the participants wisely asked me as a clarifying question, could I explain more what I meant about not doing enough? And she was particularly interested in the word enough. It's a great clarifying question because it opened windows for me to search where some of that kind of I'm not doing enough, a shouldaism was coming from my early life experience. So those kind of questions and what we ask of ourselves and others are key to moving into deeper conversations. So the third step he labeled as coming to ground, making contact with the courageous conversation. So eventually, as we get to know others on a deeper level, we may feel an inclination or urge to seek a greater understanding of something they have shared with us. It may feel like it takes courage to knock at a door that's ajar and put a jar by that person in another's life. But I remind myself that it also takes gentleness and pacing. I think it's quite natural that we may be curious about others' lives. That curiosity doesn't grant us permission to bombard someone with questions. If you're ever in that situation, someone's bombarding you, just honor your boundaries. You can simply say, appreciate your interest, but I don't hold up well when someone comes at me with 20 questions. So as an example, as I was getting to know someone who is now a dear friend, I noticed in our conversation that she always referred to her dad as her father, but her reference to her mother was always using her mother's first name. This did pique my curiosity. But as we shared more about our early lives, I took a little step of courage and said to her, I noticed this, how you refer to your father and the different way you refer to your mother. So if you ever feel like sharing the story behind that, I'd be happy to hear it. So I invited her. And at the time, I don't think it felt like a lot of courage. I felt like it was the time was right. So the fourth step he labels as artistry, following the path of vulnerability and revelation. So the principle behind these 2 intertwined elements of our lives is that there's no way around the fact that in sharing parts of ourselves, we become less hidden. When we open up to another and share some part of who we are, it is almost inevitable that there will be some points in the relationship in which we each might feel a little bit disappointed, misunderstood, or hurt. It also goes without saying that it's worth the effort because we're also bound to experience joy, happiness, caring, and support. I love how White introduces the principle of artistry because I think in deeper conversations, artistry plays a huge part. It's a combination, as I define it or think of it, as intuitiveness, insight, judgment. It's about a gentle touch, the timing, and phrasing as we reach out gently to better understand and support the essence of another. So there's a fine line between nosy curiosity and a true interest in connecting with someone's inner being. If I'm thinking about asking a question, I pause and ask this question of myself first. How will knowing the answer to my question enable me to better understand how I can be a good friend or companion to this person? If I can't answer that question in a way I'm comfortable with, then I don't ask the question I'm thinking of asking. This fifth step is cultivating robust vulnerability and asking for visible and invisible help. I find that as I gain more practice engaging in deeper conversations, I'm more comfortable in trusting my instincts and intuition. When might be a good time to ask a question or share more of myself? One observation I have about us at First Parish is we're all great about willing to offer to help others, but we struggle when asking for our own help. I'm not sure why that's so difficult. I think we like our independence. But I think another reason is we don't want to put ourselves out there on the line saying we need help to be turned down. So I think how we phrase the question can make a difference. So instead of me calling you up and saying, hey, can you drive me to a medical appointment next Thursday at 2:00? I'm kind of just setting that question up so you're likely to answer yes or no. But here's another way I could say it that makes it a little softer for what I might hear. You could say, are you available? Or do you have a conflict or something else going on? But are you available to drive me to a medical appointment next Thursday at 2:00? This phrasing makes room for a person to give an explanation as why they may or may not be able to do it. You know, if they say, I'm sorry, I can't help you that day, I have plans with family, but I'm happy to do it at another time. That's a much better way of setting up the question to ask for help. We also don't pay much attention in our lives to the invisible forms of help that we receive or that we extend to others. I've never thought of my questions to try to help someone or listen to them and ask clarifying questions. I've never thought of it as a gift of invisible help, but it actually is. So it reminds me when someone that does that for me to take the time to thank them for sharing their caring ministry. So, asking for assistance or giving assistance is a great way to open other doors to have deeper conversations. So number 6 is making the invitation the crucial marker of a real conversation. So White's remark about this principle suggests that as we form deeper relationship with others, our lives can prompt us to invite others to share some insights that might be helpful for us to hear. I use these guidelines with clarifying questions in my professional and volunteer work and in my personal life. So one of the ways in which I've used it in my work environment is I'll invite people that I trust and I value their viewpoints, and I'll provide an overview of a dilemma I'm trying to resolve. And then I'll share how I'm looking at it and invite others in the group to share their perception of the issue. I actually have done this also with members of First Parish. There's a little bit of a vulnerability in that because, it's possible that a listener could say to you, I don't know how you're thinking of it that way. I would never go down that route. But I find in our community, we're safe to practice with. So it's a great way of inviting others into our lives and maybe hearing things that we don't necessarily understand ourselves. And one of my favorite steps is the last step, bringing in the harvest of presence. I love the image of bringing in the harvest. I grew up in farmland as a kid, so I got to witness harvesting every fall. And it's something I never thought about in terms of these kind of conversations. But I had friends visiting from out of town. We've been friends for probably 30 years over July 4th. And we've had many wonderful conversations together, but they haven't traveled, nor have I traveled. So this was the first time for us to be together in 2 years. So we made a commitment together, a conscious decision that we were going to keep our time and attention to conversing. So we agreed in advance we were going to pick up food for dinner. We weren't going to spend our time in the kitchen cooking. We had such a wonderful time together, and I savored the connection I felt with them for a long time after they went back to where they lived. I took the time to write to them based on hearing David White talk about harvesting the present. And I wrote to express just what a wonderful and how much I valued our time together. And the funny thing about it is, as we do that, it just invites more opportunities because it lets others know how helpful it's been. Also do these deeper conversations with ourselves. Sometimes I pause to say, what's my inner voice inviting me to hear or to ask? I offer a few additional thoughts I have about having deeper conversations beyond what White has shared. If I'm going to meet someone for dinner that I haven't seen in a while, I find myself spending time during the day thinking about that person, thinking about some things I might want to ask, thinking about parts of myself that I'd like to share. I also know I do better when I'm rested and my mind isn't doing that hamster wheel where I'm thinking about, okay, tomorrow I have to do this, and then the next day I have to do that. I discovered a couple of years ago the concept of do-overs. I love do-overs. So do-overs are opportunities that we have to add to, revise, clarify, attention to things we may have overlooked in a more recent conversation with someone. So a do-over might look something like the following. Since we talked last, I fear that I may not have registered the degree of stress that your work situation is causing you. Sorry that I missed the anguish the first time you shared it. And I want you to know I'm open to hearing how you're doing and how I might be more supportive. So it's kind of a do-over. You can add to the experience, something that you feel like maybe you didn't include. So I want to share a little bit about why I see the potential to embrace our deep conversations as a form of ministry. During this period, limiting our sharing of the same physical spaces, we can't safely hug or witness one another in person as a way of exhibiting our caring. But we can hug each other with our words, our time, our listening, and our willingness to deeply hear one another. Deep listening offers us an opportunity to become more known, more visible, to share more of ourselves that typically remains hidden or unshared. Deep listening also includes listening below the surface level of what someone says. It's also listening for what isn't said. If someone you know well leaves out talking about something that you know is central to their life, activate your intuitive artist to see if you want to gently open that door. But I'm guided by the words of Emily Dickinson I discovered many years ago in all of these situations. I'm reminded of her words, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. We are each allowed permission to share our truths and our sharing at our own pace. I would feel remiss here if I didn't take this opportunity to call attention to our small group ministries before I conclude. We have 5 active groups in our parish, and most of us have seats available this fall. You can find out more about our groups and when we meet if you go to the First Parish website. Personally, I find our facilitators are non-threatening. Most of us are pretty laid back. And I recommend that if you're thinking about joining a small group, reach out to the facilitator and ask to meet with them. I always meet with anyone who wants to join my group in advance, so I can answer their questions and share some examples of how our sessions work. About every year and a half, we do surveys of people that have participated in small group and ask them what they most value. And here's the 2 things we always hear. The group offer a chance for people to get to know one another better in the parish. And they also provide opportunities to have conversations about topics that matter and that we seldom have in other parts of our life. I hope perhaps that I have renewed or raised our awareness of the powerful benefits that our conversations offer us. When we approach our conversations with one another as a way of holding them with care, and accepting the invitation to be a witness to another's life, we are indeed entering a sacred space. We are ministering to one another. Giving voice to what we're experiencing grants us greater clarity and appreciation for our life's experience. I am reminded of the words of Paulo Freire as he defined literacy in our conversations. Literacy is the ability to give words to your experience, to share that experience with others, to reflect on our lives, and to take positive steps for change. I want to close by thanking you for your patience with Teddy Tico joining me as part of this presentation. And I want to just close with the first line of David Whyte's closing remarks. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. Please join in singing aloud at home for our second hymn, number 360, Here We Have Gathered, with words by Alicia S. Carpenter.
Here we have gathered, gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
As we close our worship today, please remember to look for emails from First Parish and follow us on social media for opportunities to connect. We also encourage you to check in with your friends at First Parish and to double check your own contact information on the online Realm directory. When today's service ends, you are all invited to stay with us for our Zoom social hour. As we extinguish our chalice today, please join me from home in saying those words written by Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Elizabeth Selly Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And for our closing words, I again have selected these from David Whyte. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink, and the cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is simply waiting for you. Namaste.
Everybody's so mixed up about love these days. Everybody's trying to work it out in different ways. I don't really need to know your aspirations. What I need from you, babe, is good conversation to put my mind at ease. No friend called the other day and wasn't quite sure what to say. Didn't seem to know me anymore. And I said, don't treat me like I'm someone new. I'm still the same one you used to talk to. But all I need from your friend is good conversation. Good conversation to put my mind at ease. Though it seems as if the world has come between us and our lives don't look the same. Though in the past you have shared all my happiness, will you be there to share the pain? Every day I'm surrounded by a million voices from the sky, and they all have the same thing to say. Now what I need is something new. Is it something you could do to share that kind of good conversation? It's good conversation that puts my mind at ease. Puts my mind at ease.